Hello everyone, hi! My name is Lorraine Besse. I'm a teacher here, despite every evidence to the contrary. I have been a teacher here for 2 semesters, like 2 years, I've taught 2 semesters of this class, podcast producer, so I'm doing it for the M2 double joint master, sorry. And just as a little backstory, I used to be a student here, but a long time ago. So I've been around this school for a while, I guess. So what we're here today to do is to present the fruits of our labor of this semester. So it's autumn semester. We did, so in the podcast producer class, sorry, I'm gonna. Merci. In this class, basically the podcast producer class, what I was told when I started, I guess, by the school was, we have this existing podcast called What Keeps You Up at Night, sorry. And it's like interviews of people with like leaders, opinion leaders, telling their relationships to night and to how they work at night, what happens at night, blah, blah, blah. And when I arrived, I wanted to do something a little bit different and something a little bit more, I guess, complex than what is basically an interview. An interview is like the baseline of all journalism. So of course it's important and interesting. Just I wanted, I guess, to take things further and to go into what makes podcast sometimes unique and complicated, which is like a diverse storytelling. And so we did something, and so those are the seasons, like the sub-seasons that we did, which are The Night I Didn't Sleep. My inspiration for this, basically, I don't know if you've seen that documentary, there's a Netflix documentary about the 13th of November, and it's like chronological, different voices, different sources explaining, and each giving their account of an event, and this one happened to be at night. So with my main goals being storytelling and night, that's how I came up with The Night I Didn't Sleep. And so we did it last year, and we did it again this semester. So the way I approach this class is that it's kind of a set, I guess, set of rules. Like you have to, like your episode will be broadcasted in this podcast. It has to follow this guideline. And I know that sometimes it can feel frustrating to kind of work within this set of rules. So that's why I basically give complete, if possible, liberty to the students as to the topic they choose. And so the 6 topics that you will see here are chosen by the students. We, of course, worked on them together so that we made sure they were doable, mostly accessible, and possible to do in the timeline, in the time frame that we had. So the way I approach this class, at least the way I try to do it, is that I'm a producer. That's the job that I have. So I assume that I'm going to produce works, and like there are no training wheels, is what I mean. It's like we have the first months where we kind of get our hands on the softwares and just the way audio works, I guess. And then starting the end of month 1, we're like, okay, the topic is here. You have 2 months. You have to do a 40-minute episode. That always kind of scares people. They're always like, what? 40 minutes? And then they end up doing 40 minutes because that's how you tell a story. And then we do the interviews, and we do research for archives and music, and then we edit it together, and then we do voiceover. So it's quite a big job. That's why we do it in groups. So it's six groups or 3 or 4, each one with a task that kind of goes with where your heart lies, I guess. Some people really enjoyed editing, so of course that's where they went. So in the end, since the main goal of this whole class is to have those episodes broadcasted, it kind of feels like that's what I mean. It's not an exercise, it's basically real from the beginning to the end. Not to say that your exercises aren't real, but what I mean is, like, I think the added part of having it online, I think, adds to the pressure and to the investment that we all give for it. Because like our names are next to that, you will be able to use it for your portfolios, and I'm using it for my resume. So matter. I guess it should all be good, is what I mean. So let me just start by saying that I'm very proud of the work we did, that the first episode is already live. It's the episode done by Lisa, Juliette, Camille, and Gillen, who took on the wondrous feat of following the night of the presidential election in the US, but they did it like for real. It's the night they didn't sleep, but they will tell you more about that. It's just, this one is already online, and then it's gonna be every 2 weeks. There's the teaser that we're gonna listen to, I guess, to start, and then each one will speak to their work. If that works.
For the fourth season of What Keeps You Up at Night, we went back in time once more to explore how life-changing events happen sometimes in the middle of the night. From global politics to natural catastrophe, from voices faint under the rubble to voices loud to defend themselves. Come along on a taxi drive on election night. Enter the backstages of the French Cinema Awards disrupted by a courageous voice. See the effects of natural disasters on the people and the places they touch. These 6 episodes tell the story of the night they didn't sleep. They will be available from the 18th of February and every 2 weeks on Spotify and other platforms. Until then, sleep well.
Right. So those are so kind of to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about, but not that much. But the way we're going to proceed now is I'm going to call each, like, one person from each group, and you guys will talk about basically the backstages of how you guys worked. And we're going to start with the famous group about the night I didn't sleep, the night Trump won again. I think that's the title. So Lisa and Juliette. Yay!
Hi everyone. So we did the election night that we covered live. So it was a bit different from all of the other episodes that were more kind of looking back at one night and how everyone experienced it. For us, it was more like just living it through the like eyes of different people experiencing it. So we went to the France 24 newsroom. We went to a bar night at Harris Bar. That's a really famous American bar. We also went at different watch parties across the city. And yeah, also election brunch the next morning. We went to, basically we followed a whole set of different characters, and we lived the night with them. And yeah, I think it was very challenging in terms of we didn't know what to expect. So everything was kind of planned on that one night, and we didn't have the chance of a second chance. Like we could not fail. We did do a lot of pre-interviews before, a lot of them that also helped us kind of create that narrative. Also because one of the people who worked on that project is American, so I think that also gave us a bit more of a personal touch, personal narrative. And it was also very emotional to be following that night. I think at like 2, 3 a.m. the mood kind of shifted. I think you can kind of feel that in the podcast of like the vibes changing following the night. And yeah, I think it was very interesting also talking to Republicans, talking to Democrats, talking to journalists, how they covered the election from Paris, talking to Americans abroad, how they experienced the election, feeling maybe a bit more detached or a bit more removed or a bit more alienated from home. I don't know if you want to add on that.
I don't know. I think you did a pretty good summary. But we wrote down some funny things that happened. Maybe that's a good way to conclude. For example, Gillen was asked by her main character to buy him cigarettes for election night because he just had a bike accident and he was on a lot of meds that night, but he had to soldier on. Or the time we were interviewing Nicolas Conquer, who is the spokesperson for the Republicans overseas, and the whole time there was this statue of the Joker behind him, and I just didn't know where to look the whole time. Yeah, and then also Gillen especially, I think, had the weird feeling of just being a random intruder in newsrooms where people just like walking really intensively, and she would just like pop in and put a mic somewhere, and they were like, "Who is this person?" But I have no time. And then yeah, I went to a brunch of a Guardian columnist at like 8 a.m. on the 6th of November, and I'd been told that there would be like a lot of journalists and experts there, but it was really just him and his friends pouring liquor into their coffees. So yeah, a lot of strange and funny moments also, but I think yeah. Thank you.
So this episode is like it's one of the longest one. It's also like we broadcasted it first because obviously it's the closest, I guess, to the news that we have. So the girls told about the specifics challenge that their group had. Exactly, like the biggest one was you have one shot, I guess. It's like that one night of recording, and it still was kind of late in the semester, so that means less time editing as well. So the way we approached it is we did whatever we could to do it to do before we did it, so that you guys could just go into the zone. And that group really worked well in terms of transcribing. Like you had, I don't know, 3 hours more of rushes, like it's much more. So, and it was also like a rare opportunity, I guess, of doing a lot of reporting, because most of the topics that we chose are in the past. So it's mostly retelling, interviews of retelling and archives and stuff. This one meant a lot of reporting, and I think that was a nice challenge as well. So it's an excellent episode that you guys should all listen to. The next one, so it's not going to be the next one broadcasted, but it was going to be. It's a one about the earthquake in Turkey in 2023. Mehmet, can you come up? Yay! Here you go.
Get a mic?
Yes, you do.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for having me. So this, as you know, on the 6th of February 2023, so it was just the second year anniversary, a 7.6 magnitude earthquake, two earthquakes in fact, hit southern Turkey and northern Syria, resulting in more than 50,000 deaths. And obviously it led to a lot of people not being able to sleep, unfortunately. So we decided that we would do our podcast episode on this. And there were a few challenges that we were met with. So the first one was being such a, I mean, every story is important, obviously, but this one had a lot of trauma behind it for the people involved. And so when we were trying to find people, there was obviously the editorial choice of who we were going to go with, in terms of what was going to be realizable as well, because we're here and we don't get the funds to fly off to Turkey to do interviews. What we ended up doing is we interviewed someone who was here from the region, who was affected. Thankfully, nobody in her family suffered from it, I mean, physically, apart from losing their house. And so we did one part of the podcast with them, for living it, let's say, from away. And we found someone, a friend of mine, who happened to be there at that time. And so we have this kind of, we tried to weave that in so that we would have two different stories. That involved us having to do interviews, again, on Zoom, from away, having them record it, and then me having to translate everything from Turkish to English. So it was quite a long and arduous process. And also, obviously, some ethical questions were to be asked regarding, you know, what was going to be done, who were we going to interview, what kind of trauma, how do you approach trauma in an interviewing setting, and so on and so forth. There was another thing about this podcast which was quite special, and that was an editorial choice on our parts, is that we chose to include the presenter, so me, as a witness as well. And so my story is kind of intertwined with these people's stories. I do, of course, take a step back as the journalist and the reporter, but sometimes I kind of weigh in as well, which was a choice to make, and we made it. I hope it turns out well. And I'm sure there were other things that I could have talked about here. But I think that gives you an overall good idea. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. it's good that you mention being yourself part of your story. The episode we just talked about, Gillian was a part of her story as well, like the whole conclusion. I don't want to spoil it all, but it does end up like it is a personal topic, and I think that's the way podcast works, and that's what's added in this specific medium is how the journalist can sometimes, like, I personally believe that as objective as you can be, there's always a part of you in the stories that you tell. And when appropriate, in those 2 episodes, it was good to have that personalization of this is what I felt, this is how I live it. I'm in this story as well. Because you report on things, you cannot be a silent observer, I think. So in this, like this choice, I don't know if I suggested it or if not, but I was on board. And I think that's part of the medium as well, to just put yourself in the story that you're telling, because that's why also you choose the topic. So it's a very good episode, very strong, very intense as well, as you mentioned. Trauma like features, the retellings are in there as well, are graphic too. So that was a way to, like, we discussed trigger warnings, how to include those as well. How do you tell a story being realistic, and what do you hide and why do you keep? So it was like an interesting ethical episode as well. Oui, of course.
Yes. So I was just saying it is also quite hard to work on a subject and to report on a subject that you're personally involved in. Now, I wasn't there, but I was one of the first people who went there at the time as a fixer for French media, and quite a few of my friends were, directly affected. And so, first of all, when you're making something like this, you want it to be perfect, so that you pay your respects, and that's very hard because nothing is perfect, and you always find flaws, which for me were like magnified. I'm still happy with the app, but yeah. So I think that was a good question that arose as well while making this, is how involved do you have to be, or can you be, when you're working on something? Thank you.
And there's also always the question of where do you stop the meter, I guess. It's like everyone always tells you, like in French, it's le dernier kilomètre, the last mile, where do you stop? And so that's always harder as much as you're, like when you're very involved in the topic that you're doing. Luckily, we had a deadline. Next episode, Anne, who worked with Philippine and Selma on the French Assembly dissolution last summer, which you all remember really well.
Does that mic work? I don't think it...
It's over there.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Can I just quickly give a shout out to Grace, who did all these amazing covers? Isn't it good? Honestly, they're really nice. I haven't prepared a whole lot, but yeah, essentially the topic is the night the far right became mainstream, about the day of the dissolution. And the challenge we kind of put on ourselves is like how to explain the historic significance of this day, particularly to a French, non-French audience, which is how I kind of came into play in the group that, other than me, consisted of 2 other French people. So we had a lot of like, I don't get this, I don't think it's that clear. And they're like, what do you mean? And like, so it's good. I think I did a lot of the interviews because I asked a lot of dumb questions to a lot of academics, which I think actually was a good thing. It's not a perfect episode by any means. I think I'll touch on 3 challenges we had. It was in like a past tense story, but in the same time, it was an evolving story because we did the majority of this work before the censorship vote, first of all. So in fact, the latest version I think you have seen is not even really the latest version, because we've done some new speaks and stuff to the end of the episode to kind of get that perspective into it with the censorship and the new prime minister, etc. It was also challenging because it was interesting conversation we have amongst each other, how like the political, like we didn't want it to be activists, but at the same time, I think what we're missing here is maybe the voice of the far right, which we in the end didn't manage to get, even though we tried quite hard. So that's something I'd wish would be included in here, but we have a parliamentary assistant from Renaissance and an activist from LFE, and then some academics who hopefully give more of the balanced view. Lastly, it's just a very also academic topic, so trying to explain it in a way that makes sense in a reasonable way, write it into the voiceover, etc. was also kind of a challenge. But I think the outcome was quite good. I guess you'll be the judge of that.
It is a really good episode. You can be proud of it. Two things. Let me think. The first one is exactly what you mentioned, is that since it's a group of people who are, like in this class, who are, some of them are non-French people, non-French speaking people, and other international students, I tried to mix the group so that there would be a balance in the group, and that we would keep in mind that the audience is non-French speaking and maybe doesn't know as much about the French topics that we chose. The thing is, one could say, like, why not do all international topics? The answer is access. You have to do those French topics so that you can do live interviews here. So it's always kind of a balance to have. It adds as well a challenge, which is translating, which is long and a hard, like it's a strenuous process. So the episodes who ended up having to translate, like, took on an extra level of difficulty in editing, but it's something that's manageable and that's been done. So you guys did a good job. And I just had an idea that I forgot. So no, I forgot. It's okay. Thank you, Anne. Yeah. And good job to your group. I remember. That's it. No, and you mentioned it's a hard topic, as in, like, very academical. Like, that's what I said at the beginning of the class, is that most of the topics that you will choose, sometimes it's something that is very, like, it seems dull. Last year we had not this season, the season before, it was like the negotiations of the COP21 accord. Like, it's mostly people talking around a table. And I think that's an added challenge and a fun one, is what I told the students, is that if you can interest me in your storytelling, it's golden. So this topic, I know, but I was excited to have your point of view as well, to be engaged by something else, and that the fact that you know it's hard and that you worked with that in mind to make it more accessible and more interesting, that's perfect journalism to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's fine. And just said, for the people in the other room, that having the night I didn't sleep kind of focused and helped kind of centered the questions around it. It kind of made an angle, an approach angle. The next episode is going to be presented by Grace. It's the night I didn't sleep, the night Adele and Elle stood up. In her group was, Fabrizio, Emile, and Naomi, and Grace.
So ours kind of diverted from the rest of the topics a little bit, because we had a lot of very, like, political, very, not that ours isn't serious, but, you know, very serious topics. And we went through all of those, but I don't even remember how we decided on this. Really?
I remember.
Yeah, that's what it was. But it was so much fun, and we had to really kind of be careful with timing, because this whole story was a question of access at the end of the day. We were stepping into a celebrity space as lowly little young journalists who don't have a ton of connections. Like, you were our main connection to get a lot of things. So we had a date where if we didn't have any sources by then, or not enough sources, we would have to just choose a different topic. But I think it worked out partially because you were so gracious in helping us find connections, but also our team worked so well together, I think, hopefully you guys think the same. Like, Emile was like a powerhouse at finding all of these sources and reaching out and managing all of that. Seriously, you were, like, so good at that. And then, so through that, we got to interview all of these really cool feminists, and we got to interview journalists who also interviewed Adele, and all of these really amazing people around the night. And we got it done. And for me personally, as you can tell by my accent, I'm not French. But I am very interested in cinema, in, like, Me Too movements. So we got to it was special for me to not only practice my French in the interview spaces and get over that fear of like speaking to people, but it was also interesting to see the Me Too movement from a different culture, right? Because I lived it in the United States, well, lived through it, kind of that whole thing, but it was just very special to me because we got to not only dive deep into the night, but we got to dive deep into the years that led up to this night, because most of the feminists that we decided to talk to, they laid the groundwork for this to really happen, right? With Polanski, and they've been fighting him for years. So that was really special. And I'm forgetting what I wanted to say, but I guess the main challenge was access, right? And I think we pulled it off in the end, because we got to create like a profile and absence of Adele that I think made it even more special, because a lot of people didn't allow her to speak, and so it was kind of symbolic that way. And I can't remember anything else that I want to say, but I'm really proud of our team, so thanks, guys.
So mainly what we talked about with this group, like, is how much to push the deadline of access, as you said. And it was, honestly, I'll say this because you said it all. It was fun to fight with you on this about we can do it, we can do it, we can have it and everything. And to kind of have the episode change as it went. Like when it was sure that the time was too short to get Adele, like we always opened up that space if like by any miraculous change she would like speak. She does. I haven't had this news. Okay. So we worked, like it was an ever evolving process of like, how do we include the fact that she's not there? How do we write it in? How do we make sure it's still like relevant and interesting and everything? And it's still evolving today because I made them add an update like last week. So it's an evolving topic. So good job to this group. And then the next group, Lorna, Gabrielle, and Candice.
So our podcast, as you can probably tell by the flags, was about Brexit. I guess, first of all, we kind of talked a little bit about some other topics as well and landed on this one, talking about how actually the first challenge is that it's kind of boring and everyone's heard enough about Brexit. So it was how to kind of, you know, reinvigorate the interest on the nights of Brexit a little bit after now. And the other challenge was that it's a long process. It's not one night like some of the other topics. It's not a kind of the one night that Brexit happened. We focused particularly on the night of the vote and then the night when the UK officially left the EU in 2021. But even that was complicated because the UK left and then there was a grace period and then we actually left. And so, you know, there was a lot of kind of separate occasions for us to work on, which I think was complicated and interesting. But yeah, when we were interviewing people, kind of trying to explain when we were looking at became a little bit complex at times. So that was definitely one challenge, which I think we navigated eventually and found a kind of, because at first we thought, oh, we'll just choose one of the nights. And then as we kind of interviewed people and stuff, it became clear that for anyone for whom Brexit was a real experience, it wasn't just the one night, it was the vote, but then it was also the night that, for different people, it was different nights as well. So we spoke to voters and average kind of British people. We also spoke to think tank members, to ambassadors, to negotiators, things like that. So for different people, different nights were particularly Brexity. So yeah, we spoke to lots of different people and kind of ended up with the nights I didn't sleep, I suppose, for Brexit. Another challenge, I guess, and I think I can say this as a British person, was we came across trying to get emotion out of British people. Because we interviewed a fair few voters trying to, you know, really get, especially when we were interviewing Remain voters, of whom we had slightly more than, we struggled more to find more Leave voters who were happy to speak to us. And we'd hoped for these Remain voters who would talk, you know, about the sorrow of leaving their beloved EU. And they were kind of like, yeah, it sucks. It wasn't great. And like even the Leave voter we spoke to was kind of like, yeah, well, you know, I kind of thought it was best. There wasn't enough kind of, we were looking for those really juicy emotions and they weren't forthcoming. So we really kind of tried to dig deep and found some good quotes eventually. But yeah, finding really good emotional British characters became a part of our struggle, I think, at times. But yeah, and then we had a lot of interviews as well and a lot of, again, a bit like Anne's topic, we kind of had a lot of politics and a lot of, especially with negotiators and stuff, they can get really deep in their, what they find super interesting about the nitty gritty of the negotiations, which we had to kind of talk among ourselves and say, do any of us find this interesting? Are we just bored, or is it is it a thing? And so we kind of had to cut in the bits that were interesting and kind of helped add to to the wider sense of what this was, rather than it being a really kind of I guess politically specific topic. And yeah, I think in the end we ended up with an episode that really melds together the kind of more administrative and like official side of Brexit with the lived experience of the British people. And I think tried to incorporate some humor as well, which was nice. That was another issue, having to cut things that we thought were really funny, but maybe weren't as relevant as we wanted them to be. So yeah, I think that in the end we ended up with a really nice episode that kind of does, really show what Brexit has kind of meant, both over the course of it happening and also how people feel a few years on about that whole process. Yeah.
Like you mentioned, humor and having like the struggle to have like this kind of juicy quotes. One way we worked to deal with that, and within all groups, the first one is to find archives when it helps you to kind of paint a story, when you don't have that specific quote but you want to add to the moment, when it kind of builds up tension. So we did that a lot. That's like looking for the right archive, the right interview that will illustrate what you're saying, that would kind of build up I guess sound around your episode that is just not just voices speaking. So that's what the editing part was all about, just having those archives, implementing them in the writing. And the writing as well, and your group specifically did a work on a good job on that, on finding kind of a metaphor to kind of keep the listener engaged, to be attached as well to you, to the voice, to the story that you're telling. So there are many different ways, I guess, to kind of hook the listener when it's not just emotions and testimonies, because we don't have always the heartbreaking or hilariously funny witness. Sometimes you just have people who explain that they voted this and then it was cool, and you have to kind of go around it. So there are many ways to kind of work on that, and it was fun to do it. And specifically in this group, the writing process was very cool. So good job. And I think the last one is the one about the books that needed saving. I don't know which one of your group is going to talk. Hello. Come on. So, Piera, Nancy Wong, Mihail, and Lola. Yay! Full group here.
So, libraries, in Paris. Well, actually, yeah, so our episode is about floods at the BNF. And so actually it made us discover this whole world, because like libraries in Paris are huge. We only think about like museums and the Louvre, but actually there are like massive institutions, and there are many, many people who live in Paris whose lives revolve around libraries, like researchers, archivists, students, journalists. And they have real treasures, like documents that people fly from other countries to see because they're unique. And so if it gets flooded, it's a problem. And so, but also it was a really fun topic because we could also explore the more creative part. We're very, very lucky because Mihail had a flood in his bathroom. So we could record like water noises. And we went to the Musée des Égouts. It was really like a lot of water, and we kind of tried to reproduce this cozy atmosphere of the library, like the paper sounds, etc. But also like then the little drops that are where they're not supposed to be, like on ancient papyrus and so on. And yeah, maybe the challenge, like one challenge was certainly like access, because like the BNF is such a huge institution, and it's like public institution, like really important, well known in the world. And so if you text them and you're like, oh, can you tell us about the biggest fail of your like last years, because like I don't know, many thousand books were just like got wet, maybe they're not super happy at first, but actually like when people have an issue, they also really want to tell you how they solved it. So that's also how we got access. But yeah, unfortunately we couldn't speak to the like firefighters that intervened, so that was a little Yet, yes. But now we have them, so, but maybe I can.
I think Pierre did the whole presentation really well. I will just add that it was so exciting to get as nerdy as we wanted, and just when we were interviewing Selena Lansor, the coordinator of the emergency plan, it started, first it was really hard to access her and we had to wait for emails and other people, random people. And then you just had this woman who was very kind and very, I don't know, who took us to her office where she had bottes de caoutchouc, how would you say it? Yeah, just things that you wouldn't expect in a library, but of course she works at the library when it floods. It was interesting to discover that it happens way more usual than we think of it, not necessarily always the big 3 levels thing, but just water damage happens and happens in libraries as well. And I think as the interview was moving forward and we were like, tell us more, we love these books, tell us about how you do it. She really then ended up giving us way more access than we had originally expected and took us underground. We could see all the big machines, I'm just they have freezers, they freeze books if they get wet. And if it's a big amount of books and you don't have the time to solve all the situation right away, you just freeze them to prevent the ink to choo 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 choo.
Listen to the podcast to get to know.
Yeah. No, just like Lola said, I think we had the chance to get really nerdy, we love books, and just to get this aspect of how you save books is also very important. I think one part that I really loved about working on that podcast is the beautiful teamwork that we did, and also playing with the sound effects, and I guess you'll be able to listen to it, but I personally loved putting sounds, different little sounds, put them in a blender and make it something very rich and meaningful for the narration. So yeah.
Oh, I'm just gonna add that sometimes life can offer you blessings in disguise. So whenever you got a flood in your room, that can turn into an interesting story, which I was not aware until it happened. But it was a great lesson on how you're surrounded by stories. And I know that this is a huge cliche, but at the same time, it turned out to be extremely useful in our case because it helped us go to the narration. And what I love about telling stories, and maybe what somehow brought me into journalism, is also the fact that journalism allows you to have a creative approach. In order to show how a library can be flooded, well, go to the Museum of Canalization and record literally the canals of Paris. So please, if this can serve as anything else but as interesting story, then I hope it can inspire you to be as creative as possible in telling whatever you're interested and presenting it in both a visual or audio way that inspires you.
I'm sorry, just a quick element is that we also zoom out for the accidents that just tend to happen in the BNF to explain that the flood risks are a real concern and that they will increase not only for the specific case of the BNF, but for everyone who lives in Paris and particular cultural institutions. So it was important also for us to have that approach and to have experts on, well, floods will happen, climate change is ongoing, and bringing the adaptation and the mitigation aspect as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. This episode, I will say this and then I will finish and release you, was also it was really fun because it's a topic that's kind of niche in a way. A lot of the other groups did big events and telling them from a personal point of view, which is an amazing way to engage someone in the story that you're telling. But these guys decided to take that one thing that you're like, oh, it's a flood in the library. No, we're going to go deeper and we're going to record. And the way that it was kind of so open in the way to tell the story, because nothing much was told about it before, it allowed them to have that amazing creativity, which is awesome. And I will finish by saying that I do know that the way podcasts work today is evolving, and the way people do it mostly is interviews, and that's because that's cost effective, let's be honest. So these kind of episodes are they're documentaries and they're less and less possible to make in media environments. But at the same time, I do believe that it's important to teach how to make them, because it's like honestly supposed to be fun to tell the story, to kind of think of a different way to tell the story with this specific medium, which is audio only. The freedom it allows you to not have the images. Sometimes it's a freedom as well to just kind of like, I need the sound of a water drop. I can just record my own. I don't need to have like the aesthetically pleasing water drop and you know, like it's the freedom of just mixing and matching stuff, of telling the story. And I think that's the whole point of this class, I guess, is just for us to be like very focused, very intense, very accurate, and to just have fun and be creative and kind of, I always encourage kind of wild ideas. So just, I'm happy with those 6 episodes. I'm very proud of the work we did, and please listen to our podcast. If anyone has questions, don't hesitate. If not, we can just hang out and you talk to me after. Sometimes it's easier. Okay. You're free? Really? Free? They're free? You're free! Have a good day! Yay! Thank you! And to my students, come on!